What's going on, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Thanks so much for being here today. Quick shout out to both Caleb Cookster and Saab Sonnet School for becoming brand new Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube members. Appreciate you guys a ton. Make sure to check out those Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube memberships. And of course, like, subscribe, comment, and give those 5-star reviews. Tell your friend, tell your mom, tell your mom's friend, tell everyone you know, because that helps the podcast a ton. Today, we are going to be going over what lessons Green Bay learned from 2023 and what they've either already done about it or what they are going to be able to do about it, or maybe what they need to do about it in 2024 to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes from 2023. Because that's frankly what growth is all about. That's what getting better is all about. It's not just going to be this easy path where you do this, then you win championship. You have to have trials and tribulations. You have to have failures. And those failures, if you learn the lessons from them and you improve from them, turn into eventual success stories. But if you don't learn those lessons, if you don't learn from those mistakes, you are bound to repeat them over and over again, or have the same outcome that you had from the previous season, which unfortunately for Green Bay was not winning a Super Bowl. So you have to learn from those lessons. You have to get better and you have to move on. And in a lot of ways, Green Bay did, and we'll go through those ways that they already have. And again, what ways that they still need to improve and maybe fix some of those mistakes from a season ago. I think the first number one overarching obvious thing that we learned from 2023, at least from a negative side of things, was the defense wasn't good enough. It very clearly was not to the level that it needed to be in order for Green Bay to succeed at the highest of levels. There were far too many opportunities a season ago for Green Bay to seal the game with their defense, including against the 49ers in the divisional round, and the defense was just never really up to the task. And I say never, which is a bit hyperbolic. Of course, there were opportunities at times where the defense got the job done, but it wasn't good enough. And we also know that bend but don't break philosophy had its costs. There were far too many times where the offense was just sitting on the sidelines, not being able to do anything because their defense couldn't get off the field. The offense on the opposing side got into too many times a great rhythm, and far too many times teams that didn't have these dynamic offenses were still putting up points and getting yards and paper cutting the Packers defense to death. And it led to frustrating moments for fans, for the team, and I'm sure for the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball that just wants to get the ball back and get back on offense, and they can't because these offenses going against Green Bay were going on these long sustained drives that bend and broke. And I think it was obvious to just about anyone that the Joe Barry experience was a failure. It wasn't good enough. And I would say it never lived up to expectations, but the expectations were pretty low to begin with because of Joe Barry's lack of success. I was going to say success or lack thereof, but really lack of success at his stops before Green Bay. And it was really up to Joe Barry to prove, hey, I'm good enough. I know I didn't have success at these other places, but I can come in and I can be a really good defensive coordinator. That just never came to fruition. This defense that he put out there, not all due to him. The players have to go play, but it's also up to the coaching staff to get the players to buy in to what you're trying to do, and that just never felt right either. And it was very clear from some of the, just like the Jair Alexander situations and just how some of these players performed within this defense, that wasn't good enough. And I think the overarching philosophy and how they wanted to go about beating offenses wasn't good enough. Now, thankfully, Green Bay has already done quite a few things to combat this. Of course, they fired Joe Barry. They hired Jeff Hafley and a lot of new faces along that defensive coaching staff. That is a huge step in and of itself. It doesn't guarantee you anything. It's the same thing with the special teams. Yes, it's great that you got rid of Mo Drayton, who was not up to task in, the couple special teams coordinators before them. But so far, just hiring Rich Bisaccia and making him one of the highest paid special teams coordinators and bringing in his assistants and some guys that have worked with him in the past, like Keyshawn Nixon and Dallin Levitt, and then bringing in special teams guys like Rudy Ford, amongst others, that doesn't guarantee you a change overnight that it's just going to get better. And yes, it is slightly gotten better since Rich Bisaccia has taken over, but not in any significant way. We're still not talking about even a mediocre special teams. So it's great that they moved on from Joe Barry. It's great that Jeff Hafley is in, but now it's up to Jeff Hafley to prove that this is not just the next in the line of late career Dom Capers, Mike Pettin, Joe Barry, and now Jeff Hafley. It's up to Jeff Hafley to prove that he is finally the answer to the question of, can Green Bay actually find a good defensive coordinator and put a good defense on the field? But that was a major step, because I think while we all assumed and figured Joe Barry was probably not going to be back as defensive coordinator, you didn't really know 1,000,000% for sure until they actually did it. And thankfully, I think they made that decision rather quickly. They got rid of him almost, it was like a couple days, I think, after the season ended. They moved on, and then they quickly started their search and, again, ended on Jeff Hafley. And hopefully that ends up being the right solution. But they certainly did not stop there. In were Xavier McKinney, and then a bunch of draft picks, including Javon Bullard, Edgerrin Cooper, Tyron Hopper, Katano Ladapo, Evan Williams, etc. They spent a lot of draft capital and a huge free agent signing, their biggest free agent signing on the defensive side of the ball. They also moved on from some key players, including Devondre Campbell, a linebacker, Darnell Savage, Jonathan Owens, Rudy Ford. They decided that there were a couple of the position groups that just, quite frankly, were not good enough, and they decided to do something about it. So that was clearly the first lesson, is that this was not a championship caliber defense. It had to be better, and Joe Barry was not the answer to the question of, could he lead a better defense? And so they had to find somebody else to do it. Like I said, this is not a guarantee. This is not a crowning of Jeff Hafley and saying, yep, got the guy, it's a guarantee, lead pipe lock, or anything like that. He's going to have to go and prove it. But you couldn't stay status quo. You couldn't stay the same. You had to make a significant change. They did it. And I think the other thing that's worth noting here too is that it very much seems, from what we've heard so far, that Jeff Hafley's defense is a 180-degree difference from what Joe Barry's was. More attacking, more pressure, more man coverage, more press coverage. There's a lot of the things that Packer fans have been asking for some time, we're going to get. At least it seems that way. And I'll say one more time, there are advantages and disadvantages to every defense. So yes, it sounds good that Green Bay is going to be doing those things that a lot of people have been asking for, but there are ways for offenses to take advantage of that style of play as well. And it'll be up to Jeff Hafley to have answers to those questions and to make sure that his defense is prepared and ready for whatever the opposing offense is going to throw his way. I'm excited about it. It's a major change, and it's certainly a lesson that they learned from this past season. Number two, it is extremely important with this still young offense, even though we saw what they were capable of at the end of last year and what we believe they're capable of this year. It is extremely important that you have playmakers at the running back position. We saw last year when Aaron Jones went out, that running back position did not have the playmakers they need. They tried Dylan, didn't really work from a playmaking standpoint. They tried Emmanuel Wilson at times. They tried Kenyon Drake to bring in. They brought in James Robinson. Nothing really worked. And it showed when you had Aaron Jones in the game and you had a playmaking running back, the offense felt like almost at all times like it was clicking on all cylinders. Like the opposing defense had no idea how to stop both this dynamic Packers run game and all the weapons that they had on offense. And that's why Brian Gutekunst went out and did two things. Yes, you moved on from Aaron Jones, which feels like the antithesis of what you were hoping for. If you're trying to have more playmakers, getting rid of your biggest one, it doesn't necessarily seem like the wisest move. That one is still going to be TBD on how this works out. There's a way that goes horribly wrong. There's a way that it goes extremely right. And the idea behind this, of course, is that you bring in Josh Jacobs, somebody that in 2022 arguably had a better year than Aaron Jones had at any point in his entire career, which is saying something because Jones is unbelievable. And you then go also and get Marshawn Lloyd. And you get another playmaking running back that gives you options should something happen to Josh Jacobs. And then, of course, you still have A.J. Dillon, not a playmaker, but a pretty solid option as a number 3 running back if it would ever get to that point. And I think the beautiful thing here is that you have some more options. And that's what Green Bay was really lacking. Depth and options when it came to playmaking running backs. Last year, they had one who was injured often, and now they have two in both Josh Jacobs and in Marshawn Lloyd. I think that was a lesson they clearly learned. I think it's going to be something that is going to help them a lot more. And you just kind of figure like after, if let's just put Jacobs and Jones for the sake of this argument on about the same level, right? Now everyone after Marshawn Lloyd moves down a step. Instead of Dillon being your 2, he's your 3. Instead of Wilson being your 3, he's your 4, and so on and so forth. Like it just, everything else feels right because you now have Marshawn Lloyd in there too as your number 2, and he's another guy that seems to be a playmaker and somebody who could take it the distance really at any given moment as well. So I think they definitely learned that lesson, and I think they're going to be much better prepared this upcoming year. Number 3 is a lesson they should have learned in 2021. In specifically this one, a weakness can haunt you at your worst possible time. That's got to be a lesson that they learn because, like I mentioned, in 2021, they had a brutal special teams all year, one of the worst special teams I've ever seen. What happens? Divisional round, game on the line, have to have it, need to win. Brutal special teams performance leads to a 49ers win and the last dance being over with before it could even really get started from a playoff standpoint. And last year, 49ers game again, on the road this time, and you had a kicker issue pretty much all season long, did not have consistency, didn't have, I don't think, the belief or the faith that Anders was going to be able to go in and make clutch field goals. And you get to the point in the fourth quarter where you desperately need a field goal and you can't make it. And it keeps it a 4-point game. The 49ers go down, score a touchdown. Instead of being tied, they are now up by 3. And then, unfortunately, Jordan goes down and throws an interception on the following drive. And that's the end of the season. So it is, again, super important that you learn from your mistakes in season and you understand that whatever that weakness is, teams are, if it's a non-special teams type issue like a kicker, teams are going to exploit it come playoff time, or in the case of a kicker, it might just exploit itself. They didn't learn that lesson in season. That's a tough thing to do in season, is to kind of replace that kicker. I get it. It's not like there's a ton of great options out there, but they did not erase those errors through the course of the season, and again, cost them at the worst time. They got to do better with that, and I'll add on to this as well. As regards to the kicking competition, they're trying. They've got 3 kickers in camp. They've already went through another one. They've had 4 in this offseason. They're trying to find the best guy for that job, but they need to, and that's sort of another side lesson here that they need to learn. Number 4, competition, makes everyone better. We saw last year that Rashid stepped up in a pretty significant way when Yosh Nijman started rotating in for him. John Runyon Jr. started playing a whole heck of a lot better once Sean Rhyan started rotating in with him. And there was obviously competition at wide receiver and a variety of different positions on offense and on defense. And it felt like that competition really brought out the best in everyone when there were those competitive spots. And I believe how they've already gone about addressing that is they've got 11 new draft picks that are in. They go get McKinney and Jacobs and even a guy like Andre Dillard. They're looking to get competition everywhere. They don't want anything taken for granted. They don't want anyone getting casual or lazy or taking, I got my spot, I don't need to do much more. That competition is going to be important. It clearly helps your depth as well, but it pushes the player that's number 1 on the list to make sure that they stay the best version of themselves, or somebody else is going to take their job. And that competition served Green Bay insanely well in 2023. And the hope is that with all these new players at a lot of positions where there's going to be a lot of competition, it will make it even better in 2024. Number 5, we learned that offensive line depth is invaluable. You're expecting David Bakhtiari to play the season, or at least a good chunk of it, and he's down after week 1. And they didn't have a ton of injuries along the offensive line last year, but even the depth for Bakhtiari and just what they were able to do with rotating in guys like Rashid Walker and Yosh Nijman, guys like Sean Rhyan and John Runyon Jr., they had great depth along the offensive line, and it certainly helped them through the course of the year. And I think, yes, they lost Bakhtiari to some extent. He only played a game a season ago, but you lost Yosh Nijman and John Runyon Jr., but you go get Jordan Morgan in the first round, Andre Dillard as a free agent signing, Travis Glover, Jacob Monk, your biggest undrafted free agent signing was Donovan Jennings. Like, they didn't just sit back and say, yep, our offensive line will still be good. Like they probably could have, right? They probably could have just gone Walker and Jenkins, Myers, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom and said, hey, we'll have Royce Newman and Caleb Jones and Luke Tenuta be our backups. So we'll get them right. And no, they decided to put more effort into it. And they got, again, a first-round guy in Jordan Morgan. We'll see what he can do. And this kind of goes back to number 5 as well. This adds a lot of competition to the offensive line. So I think that's going to be super important for this team as well. Number 6 and number 7 goes a little bit hand in hand with just the defense not being good enough, but I'm going to break it down in a couple different ways here. Number 6, the safety room wasn't good enough. And this was something that was blatantly, clearly obvious. I will say, I did think on paper, the Savage, Owens, Rudy Ford, Anthony Johnson Jr., that whole safety group, I thought might be the worst position group in all of football last year. And to be fair to that safety group, it wasn't abysmal. It wasn't awful. It was a lot of times like fine, but it was probably more below average to bad. It wasn't good enough. We'll just put it that way. And this is another thing that came back to haunt them at some of the worst times. The Darnell Savage, 2 things, right? He's got an interception right in his hands. He drops it. And he's got Christian McCaffrey dead to rights in the hole, and he can't make a play, and Christian McCaffrey takes it to the house for a touchdown. That safety play wasn't good enough. And they said, yeah, we get it. And they go out and they get Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, and Katana Ladapo. 3 safety draft picks from rounds 2 to 5. And one of the biggest free agent signings of this offseason for any team in Xavier McKinney at safety. So they addressed it in a very smart way. We'll have to see what these rookies can do. We'll see what Xavier McKinney can do in green and gold, but they clearly saw that the safety room wasn't good enough. They learned their lesson, and they did everything they could to upgrade it this offseason. Number 7, speed matters at linebacker. Devondre had that beautiful first team All-Pro season, and then the last 2 years, he just looked a step to a step and a half slower. It just didn't look like the same guy, didn't tackle in the same way, didn't seem to have the same intensity at times, and you have to have playmakers and you have to have speed at that position. And when Campbell lost a bit of a step, that changed the calculus. And they decided to move on. It was the right call. And then they go and spend a 2nd and 3rd round pick on both Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper. This is going to give them more options. And I think that theoretically, Edgerrin Cooper should be somebody that steps up, plays with a lot more speed. I think a lot more intensity. He's going to rally to the football more. Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be better, but I think there's a great opportunity for him to be better. And again, you get a little of more insurance and depth there as well by drafting Tyron Hopper in the 3rd. Number 8, we learned that patience is key and that there will be adversity. It's not about who can be the best in week 1, although they had a really nice week 1 a season ago. It's about who can be playing their best football at the end of the year. I think this is something that I really, 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 really wish fans had a better grasp of. There are going to be setbacks through the course of the season. And trust me, I don't like losing more than anyone else. But I do think sometimes losing is valuable. I think there are things that get exposed. And I'm not saying that to like exposed where the Bears beat you one week and it exposes a weakness and now the Vikings can beat you, now the Lions can beat you, etc. I think sometimes you have an idea for a way that something's going to go, and all of a sudden you get your teeth kicked in and you get exposed that that's not going to work, and you have to sort of change course. And I go back to last season. We saw midway through the year, this team had to go through some adversity. This team had to learn some lessons. They needed to figure out a better, more efficient offense with Jordan Love at quarterback. And that was all part of the evolution. And I think we learned that a season ago. It took this new offense a lot of time to gel. And I think the lesson that maybe we all can learn is that the defense could be in a very similar situation this year. It could be that the defense for the first, 8-9 weeks up until what would have equated to the Steelers game a season ago, it maybe struggles a bit or isn't completely ready to go yet and just maybe doesn't have a great feel yet. But that's okay. There's going to be those moments. But can you be playing your best football to the end of the year? Like I said, patience is key, and there's going to be things that go wrong. And how do you overcome that adversity? I think they did a great job of that a season ago, to be playing their best football towards the end of the year and really having a chance to go to the NFC Championship game. That's going to be something that can carry over this year, and that they can continue to have that patience and work towards being the best version of themselves when they need it most at the end of the year. Number 9, we learned that the locker room matters. Listen, this locker room right now is a group of seemingly pretty special individuals that live, sleep, breathe, eat football. And I think we saw that when things did not go totally right last year, where they kept at it. They just kept trying to get better. Even when they were losing games, their focus was on getting better. And I think you look at the wide receiver and tight end room as well. There's a lot of balls to go around. There's a lot of snaps that people are trying to split between players. There's a lot of playmakers. It never seemed to be an issue. Everyone was happy for each other. Everyone was blocking for each other. And I think that, again, just goes to show you the type of tight-knit locker room that this group has. That will serve you very well. And like I said, this is one of those things where it's not always tangible, but I think players have the best opportunity to be the best versions of themselves, to reach their peak performance if they're enjoying themselves and if they have a locker room that's going to be supportive of them and that they all get along and genuinely want each other to do well. And that seems what Green Bay has. And I think they have continued to build with players in this draft and guys like Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs that fit within that locker room and are going to continue that momentum that they have of a really sound leadership group within the veterans and just the players on this team. Like I said, that all just want to completely be football junkies and do everything they can to just get better at their craft. Number 10, players need opportunities to show what they can do. We didn't know Bo Melton could do anything until he got the chance. Dontavian Wicks got a chance. Jaden Reed got a chance. Tucker Kraft got a chance. Luke Musgrave got a chance. We can go on and on. Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, LVN. All these guys got playing opportunities. Carrington Valentine. And I think that's going to be important to remember for this coaching staff this upcoming season. This is where I say winning and development don't always go hand in hand. You get into games and you kind of want to just put your best guys out there. But you know what? If you want these rookies to hit the ground running and have a chance to succeed long-term, you got to get them on the field some too. And I think that's what you can remember from what they learned last year is this rookie class in 2023 thrived, A, because they drafted really good players, but B, because they were put in positions to play and succeed and learn and kind of learn from their mistakes. And this rookie class is going to need that same thing. It's going to be harder because you have a more established roster, but you still got to find ways to get them on the field and give them the opportunity to taste NFL football and see what they can do with it. And that will serve them huge in the long run. Number 11, we learned that Jordan Love is the guy. He's the franchise QB. And what they're doing about that? Well, they are signing him to a contract extension. As of recording this, which I am recording a couple of these videos a little bit early, he has not signed an extension yet. Maybe as you're listening to this, he's already signed it. But either way, that's going to get done. They learned that he's their franchise QB. They're about to pay him like a franchise QB. And I don't know, it's necessarily quote unquote a lesson learned, but it's certainly something that we learned about the team and learned about Jordan Love, and they are going to pay him accordingly. And last but not least, we learned that this team is ready to compete right now. They were ready to compete in 2023. So what do they go do? They go and sign Josh Jacobs. They sign Xavier McKinney. They go out and be pretty aggressive in the draft, and they continue to build out a team that should even be better than where they were a season ago, which means, in my opinion, they're going to be competing when it all comes down to it in January and hopefully in February. It's a very talented core. They've added to it. Gutekunst recognized that he wasn't just going to stay status quo. He was going to go out and get players who could help this team overcome and win right now. And Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs certainly feel like, on paper, two players who can certainly help them do that. So the 12 lessons that I think we learned from a season ago: the defense wasn't good enough. They need playmakers at running back. A weakness can come back to haunt you at the worst time. Competition makes everyone look better. The offensive line depth is invaluable. The safety room was not good enough. Speed matters at linebacker. Patience is key. You're going to have to overcome adversity. The locker room matters. Players need opportunities to do what they can do and show what they can do. Jordan Love is the guy, and this team is ready to compete right freaking now. That's going to do it for me today. If there's any other lessons I missed, let me know what you think. Is there anything that I should have put on the list that maybe I didn't? Always appreciate the comments. Enjoy reading them every single day. I know I don't always get to respond to them, but trust me, I do read all of them, and I do really appreciate all the kind words and all of it. So definitely want to hear from you guys. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members: Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Dad, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, Dave McCluskey, Donald Decker, Dan Miller, Alex Hwang, Arnaldo Espinoza, Dan Gesford, Peter Ritaka, and Caleb Cookster. I'll see you guys tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.